Sim 16. Another day in Los Santos. Yeah. Tryna make a way in Los Santos. Hey, yeah. Wake up every morning, I got money on my mind. Gotta get on my grind. And if you ain't talking about no money, little homie, I ain't even got time. Another day in Los Santos.
Alright, so I'm going to make the most extensive tutorial that I've made in several videos, because there's a lot of things that I had to figure out and be able to write this particular script. And I think it's a good overall script to teach people how to do a lot of different things. We're going to learn how to use tables and loops properly. Going to learn about your shared.lua edits. Going to learn how to go in and edit the built-in base inventory system. Going to do some shop interactions, selling fish. Going to do some animations. Going to do some prop generating and removal, and do some there's a lot of stuff involved in this. So to give you a background, on FiveM, the fishing has always made me nuts. I'm an avid fisherman personally, and I love to fish. And whenever I would go to the ocean and catch a goldfish, that would almost make me want to vomit, because that's ridiculous. And if you're going to make a good RP server, I think the secret lies within making it realistic. And I have not been personally, I'm sure there's servers out there, but I haven't been on many that do a good job with fishing. And it's an easy task that everybody can do. You don't have to be a crim to do it. And you can make it a lot more in depth. And so the first thing that I wanted to do was to ensure that when someone goes fishing, if they're in freshwater, they catch freshwater fish. And if they're in saltwater, they catch saltwater fish. Pretty basic. It sounds easy, but turns out that it can be quite complicated. There's probably more than one way to do it, but I'm going to show you guys how I did that. So let's start with this. So I know what my goal is. My goal is to create freshwater and saltwater environments. My goal is to make sure that the player receives the appropriate fish depending on the environment they're fishing in. I want the player to have options for various types of rods and bait. Now, animations wise, I'm not a prop creator, so animations wise, I'm restricted to the props that are available in the base FiveM, like the typical spinning rod that's upside down, which also makes me crazy. But the animation, if you switch hands with the rod, then you're reeling the rod itself. So the animation is set up wrong to begin with, because whoever originally did it doesn't understand how a open face spinning rod works. And so that all the players are holding their rods upside down, which is annoying, but at least we can make them catch the correct fish, right? Because I have seen people in real life hold their rod wrong, which anyway. So without getting to be too deep in the weeds, so that's my goals. So we've been talking for a few minutes, and I haven't typed anything on the screen, but there's a reason for that. The first thing that you should do whenever you're going to try to create a script is to come up with a plan, right? So I'm just going to put together a plan here. So my goal is catch appropriate fish with appropriate gear relevant to the environment. That's the goal for this project. So what am I going to have to do? Well, the first thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to create all of the fish and gear necessary to execute. The second thing we're going to do is have to make appropriate items usable. We're going to then have to build some config files that can analyze the data, we're going to have to create polyzones to identify locations. And then we're going to have to pause and evaluate. Okay, so that's what this next series of tutorials is going to be about. The first tutorial, I'm going to do a detailed explanation of how to do step one, which is create all of the fish and gear necessary to execute your goal. Okay. So rather than retyping everything, I'm going to show you these files here are the ones you're going to need in order to do this step. So the first step is going to be to go into your QBCore, into your shared.lua. Some people use just a shared.lua file. On our server, we've broken it down. Some people just use this shared.lua here. In our server, we've broken it down to items, jobs, locales, main, vehicles. We have separate LUAs for each thing instead of putting them all on one so that they can be more organized. So in my items LUA, we're going to scroll down to the items that I added. And I'm not going to type in every one and bore you with that. I'm just going to scroll down to the fishing stuff. And I'm just going to step through it rather than typing it and show you how the table works. Okay, so everybody's seen the shared.lua table if you've done any sort of coding at all or modding on your server. So here's the fishing items that I've added. So I added lures. I have ballyhoo, crickets, cut bait, flies, freshwater jigs, shrimp, squid, saltwater jigs, etc. So it's set up the same as any other table. You've got your name, your label, your weight, your type. It's not an ammo item. And all of this is pretty standard for the bait. It's not combinable. I got a description in there. Okay. And then I've got rods. So I'm going to have, I don't remember how many rods it is, but it's like 16 rods or something. So I created all my rods. And so real quick, I'm going to show you how I make the PNGs, because that's something that I think people overcomplicate a lot, or they think that it's difficult to do. Basically, you want all of your PNGs to be 100 by 100 pixels for it to show up properly in the inventory. So just real quick, let me show you how I personally do that. So I just go to Google and I well, actually I use DuckDuckGo, but anyway, I search for, let's say I want to find a snapper. So I search for snapper in images, and I look for one that isn't too like just something simple, right? So here's a good one. There's a good snapper. Let's use that guy. So I save the image as, and it's going to dump it to my KSUIE fishing images in Fresh Start. So I'm going to save that. Okay, so there's my image. Now I need to edit that, so I just go to, let's see, it was in KSUIE fishing images, and I should find the snapper that I just did. It's not there. Where'd it go? Save image as Fresh Start KSUIE fishing. It's a JPEG. All right. KSUIE fishing images. Is this it? Yeah, I think that's it. Let's just rename it as a JPEG. And so to rename it, I just clicked at the end, .jpeg, and that should fix it. Yes. There we go. See, that fixed it. I don't know why it does that. My computer sometimes downloads it, puts a weird name on it. Anyway, so let's open that up, and it should open it in, nope, it didn't. Damn it. All right, so let's open it with Paint 3D. I'll just start Paint 3D. Paint 3D, open, mouse files. This should be, there it is. Okay, there we go. So now I'm going to crop it to try to make it more square. I want to keep as much as the fish as I can, but basically I need a square image. So I don't care if I cut off some of his tail. So it needs to be 579 by 579. Showing it in there, 579 by 579. Boom. There's my crop, and then you come up here to the canvas, and you go to make sure it's locked aspect, resize image. You put in 100. Boom. Save that. File save as image, and then you just name it whatever you want to name it. I'm not going to do that because I already have a snapper file, but anyway, that's how I create the inventory images. And you can see here the images I've already created. There's my snapper I already had. So it's that simple, really. I mean, you don't have to be an artist. You just find some free images and resize them to 100 by 100. So now you know how I did that. That's a little short bonus tutorial on image editing. Okay, so I've made my lures and I've made my rods. Now, the interesting thing about rods is that I'm going to want to be able to connect, to take any of these baits that are appropriate and attach them to my rod. So I'm going to have to make my rod combinable. Now, there's an issue with the inventory system that I'm going to talk about. So in order to do this script, I had to actually go in and edit the base QB inventory, because base QB inventory takes one item, like say iron oxide, and mixes it with one item, say acid. It removes both of those items and gives you one item. I don't remember what you make with iron oxide and acid, but that's how it works. And that's the base system. There's no way to combine more than one item. There's no way to get a payout of more than one item with the base QB inventory system. And just for anybody that's not using QBus, I apologize. This entire tutorial is relevant to QBus. It's not relevant to ESX. But in QB inventory, the base system that everybody has, you can combine two items and you get one item. And that's just how it is. There's no way to change that with the base system. So you have to change it. Okay. Now for my rods, I want them to be combinable, but I want this first rod, which is a advanced rod. I want it to be able to accept shrimp, squid, cut bait, saltwater jig, ballyhoo, and ultimate bait. So I want that first advanced rod to be able to accept all of these. So I use the same kind of base format that the inventory system has in the shared.lua. So I have my combinable equals, and then I made a table for accept. Each one of these curly brackets indicates a new table. And so in the accept table, there's multiple choices. And then in my reward table, there's also multiple choices. So for each item I combine to my rod is going to create a new rig, which has the name of the rod underscore name of the rig. Okay. So I had, all of these baits. Once they're combined with the rod, it's going to give you one of these rigs. Okay. So then I've made a new table, reward equals, and then I made the reward into a table. And back here, this is a new variable that I created. And I did this for a specific reason. So the only thing I intend to use on my server where I'm going to have a combination scheme like this is just fishing rods. And so what I did was I created this new variable called complex equals true. So whenever it goes to my QB inventory, it's going to evaluate, is this combinable item complex? And if it is, it's going to use a different logic than it does. This will prevent these tables and this method from messing up any existing combinable items you have, traditional combinable items. We're just going to add some extra logic in order to account for that. So I'm going to go into greater detail on how these tables and loops work later in the tutorial, but for now I'm just kind of doing step one here, which is create all the fish and gear necessary to execute. So there's my rods, and so then when I'm in freshwater, I want to be able to use these rod combos. So I'm going to be able to use worms, crickets, topwaters, freshwater jigs, and I'm going to be able to use bait casters. I'm going to be able to use common rods, fly rods, spinning rods, and ultimate rods. And then if I'm in saltwater, then I've got a different set of combos. I've got a lot more combos for saltwater. Um, I've got advanced rods, advanced tube, bait casters, etc., saltwater baits. And you can see this is a very large table. So this can be very time consuming to enter in all this data. So I came up with a strategy to basically generate these tables without having to type them all or copy and paste them or anything. And because if you copy and paste, you still have to change all the names. So I've actually got a little Excel spreadsheet that I built. I'm just going to show you how that works, so you can consider doing it yourself. It's called Syntax Helper, is what I call it. So basically, I took a Excel spreadsheet and let's spread this out a little bit. So here's my basic operators that are used in the output for the table, and then here's the basic labels that are used repeatedly. And so then I have my rod, and then I want my advanced rod to combine with shrimp, squid, cut bait, saltwater jig, ballyhoo, ultimate bait, like I showed you in the table. And this one's from an old version, so it's not correct anymore. But this is basically how you do it. So then you just come through here and you set up a bunch of equals, right? So you do this once and you set up your format, and you have like equals, and you just reference your operator cells where you need that to be, and you make one line, and once your one line is correct, then you can just drag it down, boom. Then you've done all of your tables, and then at the end over here, you take all of these individual steps that you did where you were putting in all of your things, and you come down to the end here, and then I make my output, and my output is just everything to the left, and then it gives you a nice format that you can just paste in, and then you can make it look however you want to in the spreadsheet. So this is how I do all of my table code writing, because I use a lot of tables, and so I don't like to enter every single thing. So I just set up the logic in Excel, and I basically write the majority of my table code in Excel. And so whenever you copy that over, you end up with this nice table. There's no tabs in it. I tabbed it all out just to make it look nice. So there you go. That's a little mini tutorial on an easy way to create these tables using Excel. And if you don't know how to use Excel, basically ampersand is your friend, and quote marks will allow you to type anything you want, and then ampersand, and just click the cells you want. So, all right, so there's my tables. And then I have my fish that I can be rewarded. I've got some saltwater fish, I've got some freshwater fish, and then I also want to be able to fillet all those fish. So I want my players to be able to use a fillet knife and fillet the fish, and they will get more money for fillets than they're going to get for the whole fish, because they took the time and effort to clean it. So again, I had to make a new variable for a new variable before combine. So you'll see here, this is retain. Let me do that differently. There you go. So retain. This is on all of my fish fillets, or all of my whole fish. Okay, because whenever I combine a fillet knife with my fish, I don't want to lose the fillet knife. And so I created a new variable in the table called retain, and I made it true. And so in QB inventory, it's going to use a different set of logic if there's a retain value. And so then it's going to retain the fillet knife, which is my first. It's going to retain the fillet knives, and it's going to give me these fillets, and it's also going to change the quantity. which is another thing that the baseline QB inventory doesn't do that I'm going to teach you how to do in this tutorial series. All right, so I have all my images for all of my items. I've got all of my fish. I've got all my rods. I've got all my combos. You can see why I didn't type all this out for the video, because it's obvious, you know, how it works, but it's a huge table. I mean, I've made a very complex system here for fishing with a lot of variables. So let's see, we got to create all the fish game and rigs necessary to execute, and that is done. All right. So I want to make the appropriate items usable. All right. So to make appropriate items usable, we're going to need to go. We're done with QBCore at this point. We've added all of our shared Lua items. So to make them usable, we're going to have to go to. Why is this not minimizing? Anyway, we're going to go to our nope, sorry. We're going to go to QB small resources. And we're going to go to consumables in our client, QB small resources consumables. And I did my fishing stuff at the bottom. So here's KSUIE fishing. Okay, so whenever you use the base, like there's a QB fishing script that most everyone has. It's kind of the base model QB fishing. If you use a rod more than once, it'll generate multiple rods in your hand, and then it will not delete one of the models. It'll only delete the most recent model. So in order to fix that, I put in a variable called trying to fish equals 0. And so I create my event, which is if someone uses a rig, then it's going to say, it's going to go to client fishing, consumables client fishing. It's going to check if they're trying to fish. If it's 0, then they haven't started trying to fish yet. So it'll, if it's greater than 0, if they haven't started trying to fish yet, the trying to fish is 0. If they've used a fishing rod, it's going to say, yep, it's below 0. It's going to skip this statement. And then I'm going to set trying to fish equal to 10,000. I'm going to trigger my server event to start fishing. I've got a print here just to check and verify everything's working, and then I sent an appropriate rig over to the client side, or to the QB fishing. And then I'm going to wait 10 seconds. That way, if somebody accidentally hits their use button more than once, it'll only send it over one time every 10 seconds. That way you can avoid getting the rod stuck in their hand that they can't get rid of. And then once it's waited 10 seconds, it resets trying to fish to 0, so then they can use the rod again after 10 seconds. So this is my event that's going to happen whenever someone uses a fishing rig, which is consumable. So let's jump back to QBCore real quick. To our shared items, and here's my fishing rig. This is after I've combined a bait with a rod. It's created this item. So if I take a worm and I drag it onto baitcaster with my combinable info up top, it's going to make a baitcaster worm, and then my baitcaster worm is usable. Let's see, where is that? Usable true. And so this usable true, all these are the fishing rigs that are going to send it over to that consumables Lua. So let's go back to the consumables. Okay. So this is the client side consumables. This is just going to execute. It's going to send everything over to my fishing script. All right. And then on my server side, I got my consumables. And this is where I have to, let me scroll down to the bottom. So every one of my fishing rigs are here. You have to do this for every rig. Let's see, where does it start at? It starts way up here because it's a lot of fishing rigs. So here's my add-on. So I got my baitcaster worm that we were just talking about, etc., etc. Each one is going to be entered into this. Every item that you've added that you're going to be usable. It's going to go into your server consumables.lua, and it's going to be your item. You're going to send your source and your item, source equals source. This is pretty standard. Anytime you're sending something from the server side to the client side, you have to tell it what the source is. My rig is my item.name. So it's going to send over a string. And if you don't understand how that works, let me show you. So you have to go back to the shared Lua for this. So if we're talking about the baitcaster worm, this is the label, and here's the name. And so since I said item.name, it's pulling the item because it knows which item they used in their inventory, in their NUI, or with their hotkey. And it's going to return, so I'm going to send over the item.name, which is baitcaster worm. Okay? And that's coming from the shared Lua. And I'm sending that over as my rig. All right? And then here's where I send it over. There's my source and there's my rig. And if you're new to sending stuff server side to client side, if you're sending from server to client, you always have to have source as your first send, and then whatever variables you want to send after that. So whenever they use their baitcaster worm in their inventory, it's going to come here, and then it's going to go jump to consumables client fishing, consumables client consumables fishing, boom, consumables client fishing, and it's bringing over the rig. You do not put source here. Source is dumped once it comes to the client side. You just have to tell it which client to send to from the server. So you never have source on your client side as a function variable. And there you go. So we have made all of our items usable. So done. Obviously, this takes a lot longer whenever you're building everything out. Now, in the I hope so far this has been informative. This is just tutorial 1 in this series. The next tutorial is going to be a lot more in depth, with a lot more explanation. This stuff should be fairly review worthy for anybody that's worked in modding servers. It's just kind of an overview of anyone that doesn't understand how the shared Lua works, how the consumables work, etc. So basically what I've showed you in this tutorial is I showed you that I wanted to create all the fishing gear necessary to execute my goal. And we've done that. We've created all the fishing baits. We've created all the rods. We've put them all on the tables. We're going to make appropriate items usable. We've already done that. And then next we're going to build some config files for the fishing. I'm going to be a little more in depth on that, where I'm building those tables in the next tutorial. And then also I'm going to go ahead and add this. Normally you wouldn't know you needed this until afterwards. Let's call it 3A. I already know that this is an issue, so you have to make the inventory system work with multiple combines and multiple payouts, multiple rewards. So this is something that whenever I did this myself the first time, I got to pause and evaluate whenever I realized that the reward system and the shared the QB inventory based system was not sufficient for what I wanted to do. And so the next tutorial, we're going to talk about building your fishing script. And then probably the tutorial after that, I'm going to jump back and show you how to fix the inventory system. And those are going to be a little more in depth. This was, like I said, kind of a review. So thanks for watching, and I hope you tune in for the next tutorial. I'm not going to release these until all the tutorials are finished, so that you can go from one to the next and you don't have to wait to find out how to do the next thing. So thanks for watching. If you learned anything, please give me a like. And tune in for the next video. This will all be part of the same playlist. Thank you.
Hey, it's M16. Another day in Los Santos. Hey, tryna make a way in Los Santos. Hey, yeah. Wake up every morning, I got money on my mind. Gotta get on my grind. And if you ain't talking about no money, little homie, I ain't even got time. Another day in Los Santos, tryna make a way in Los Santos. Yeah, another day in Los Santos, I gotta make a way in Los Santos. Look, I'm about my cash. Weasel on top, cause you know we get the bag. M16, never fold, never drag. Tryna make the city out and put us all on the map, no cap. And you know that's the truth. Hit me if you need a track, cause I stay up in the booth. In the city where it's gritty, but your dreams come true. Everybody on their grind, and that's something I salute. Yeah, I told y'all I'ma make it. On my soul, I'm too real, I can't fake shit. All the love that y'all show is amazing. Gotta be on top, cause I came from the basement. 16. Wake up every morning, I got money.